Hey everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm here with Scott,
Hello, hello.
and we're going to be talking a little bit about photo editing and not so much teaching exactly how step by step to edit a photo, but a little bit more just concepts and different ways we edit. Scott, real quick, if you can turn your volume down a little, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Okay.
Thank you. Um, cool. So let's see. I think let's kick it off with Scott. I know he had a really good setup to get started here. Let me just switch screens so we can give him. There you go, Scott. You are live and ready to go.
Okay. Yeah, so a couple things. Ray and I have a little bit different style, so we thought we'd just kind of focus on the styles that we use a lot. Ray is a little bit more environmental. He likes to take a lot of, I guess, smaller in the frame images, and I tend to crop more, and I tend to get a little bit closer on the birds. So I'm going to do a little bit more with portraits and how I edit portraits. His focus will probably be a little bit more on kind of the environment and how he edits that. So that's basic overall. But what I thought I'd do is kind of show you some images and how they come out of the camera. I'm going to take a Ren, and this is actually the finished version, but a lot of what we wanted to do was show before and after. And there's a lot of people that post images pretty much out of the camera. I've heard things like, well, I'm a purist. I don't want to, I want to capture what I showed. And we just wanted to show you that even quick edits, 5 or 10 minutes, we're going to do a challenge at the end and try to edit a picture in like 2 or 3 minutes and see what we can do with it. But even a quick edit makes a big difference. So this ran out of the camera actually looked like this. This is not the kind of picture I would post anywhere and be real proud of. But when you shoot in RAW, which both Ray and I shoot in RAW, the camera is not going to do a lot of adjustments for you. When you set your camera to JPEG, it is going to take and kind of add contrast or lighten it or make some adjustments to exposure. But when you shoot in RAW, it's not. It's going to give you the flexibility to do that. So what I thought I would do is just take this image, and I'm actually going to open up the actual image as it came out of the camera, and I'm going to edit it real quick to show you what that looked like
Hey
and
Scott, I'm
how I
just
did
going to
it. So
ask you to pause one
here's
second.
the image. Yep.
I just have something up on the screen here that says speakers muted, and I wanted to see if I can just get rid of that because it's actually, oops, sorry about that. It's actually showing on top of your screen through everything, so I just wanted to see if I could get rid of that little indicator. Does not seem like I can. Oops, now I totally lost you. Shit. Are you still
I'm
there,
here.
Scott? You're there? Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
there
I'm
we go.
here.
Okay, I just need to get your video back. Oh, go to call. There we go. Sorry, this new Skype is really weird. Um, I'm not seeing a way to get rid of that. It just constantly has this speakers muted thing up on the screen, but all right, it's not that big a deal, so I guess we'll keep continuing on. Sorry about that. So go ahead.
Okay. Yep. So first thing I'm going to do with this image is just kind of crop it down to something that I would use for a closer portrait. So we'll go something like this. I'm also going to rotate it a little bit. I tend to try to get beaks horizontal, so I'm never afraid to rotate an image. I don't ever think that I get it exactly horizontal anyway. I'd probably be somewhere in here. I like always the bird to be looking into the frame, so something like that. I'm going to quickly go through, and you could probably see where I'm going to dial. Now, Lightroom, I do it in Photoshop, Adobe Raw, but Lightroom, exact same basic premise with sliders.
Correct.
I'll bring up the exposure a little bit, contrast, turn down highlights, pull up shadows. The big thing for me is whites. I look at the histogram, and I'm going to pull up whites until they blow out, and the indicator up there tells me when it blows, and then I'm going to pull it back down until it's kind of pleasing for me. And then I do the same with blacks. I'm going to pull those back down until I see black areas start to indicate that they're too black, and then I'm going to pull them back. A little bit of clarity and vibrance. So I would probably say, as a real quick edit and starting point, this is pretty close. And then I like to come up to the temperature, and generally I warm a little bit and see what it looks like. So I'll go from where it came out of the camera. There are ways to adjust technically perfect white balance, and sometimes I'll do that, but overall I just eyeball it. And so this is looking, if I went up here, it's too warm. come right in there. And that's what I would take over to Photoshop. So it would look something more similar to this. And then from here, I'm going to pull this back. A lot of people don't have or don't use Photoshop. So I'm just going to duplicate the layer real quick. And I'm going to use, and I'm going to set it back to Lightroom or Camera Raw. Typically, there's only one more step that I do on every photo, and I dodge and bird every photo that I touch almost without exception.
Same here.
So if I take the pen, it's the easiest tool to use in either Lightroom or Photoshop. You could turn the exposure down and dial these highlights down. Basically, you're going to burn using this. Now, I'm warning you, I do not do this. I'm just showing you a technique that if you wanted to do it, I don't like the way it does it in either Lightroom or this Photoshop Raw.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely. I never like to do any highly selective edits in the raw editor, which I use Lightroom, but I just find Photoshop much more precise and manageable to do those edits in.
Yeah, I know there are people who only do it, so I'm just going to show you, but again, I would never do it. So I did a brush and I just darkened the bottom edge. So the typical thing you're going to see with all my images is I'm going to darken the area behind the bird and I'm going to lighten the area in front if it needs it. Now this one doesn't because there's already good light here. I'm going to then take the exposure up. I created a new brush. I'm going to just dial in here to the eyeball area. And I'm going to try to just lighten a couple areas here.
Hey Scott, Ray asks, he says he doesn't see those sliders in his Photoshop, and I just wanted to answer the question why. Ray, Scott has the photo open in the Camera Raw plugin in Photoshop, so Scott doesn't use Lightroom. He does all his raw photo editing in Photoshop, which Photoshop has a separate window that opens up the Camera Raw plugin, and it gives you all those sliders. So it's basically the same sliders and adjustments you would have in Lightroom, just presented as a different way directly in Photoshop. So continue, Scott.
Yeah. Yep. So if I was doing this all in Lightroom, for example, I wouldn't have made the step where I went out to Photoshop and came back. I would just do what I'm doing now with the dodge and burn right in here. But again, I don't like it. You're gonna, when I export this, you're gonna see banding and stuff. But I am gonna take it now and just bring it back over to Photoshop and just show you the before and after with the dodge and burn that I did. So this is, that's the original, and then that's with the dodge and burn. Now you're going to see it looks much better the way I do it, but I just wanted to show you that that is a general way to do it. So I'm gonna go over to Ray. I think he's going to go full screen and he's going to do a quick edit on something as well.
Yep, sounds good. So I have, I'm just going to show you guys a little bit of before and afters right now. So let me switch over to my screen. Here you go. Here's a Canada Warbler I shot. So this is the completely retouched or unadjusted, I should say, file. This is straight out of camera. So nice clean shot, generally good color, but I want to show you the next image here. This is what I did. This is just a Lightroom edit. So cropping it, a little bit of white balance warming, a little bit of contrast, and it looks definitely better. So real minor adjustments, but they're all just kind of global adjustments, nothing selective there. And then I'll show you the next final image. This is the one that I actually displayed in or edited in Photoshop, and this was the final image that was shared out. So if you'll notice here, so just from here's the Lightroom edit, here's the Photoshop edit. So made the background a lot more green. I definitely popped the eye just like Scott was talking about, and I actually darkened that green background just a tiny bit, so it kind of really makes the bird stand out. So if we kind of step through the progression here and go from straight out of camera, basic Lightroom edit, and then to Photoshop, each step isn't really that big, but if I show you the complete before and after, so straight out of the camera and then the final edit, there's a pretty significant change there. And that's something that I do often. You know, you kind of, it's a little step here, a little step there, and then you will actually see a big difference from beginning to the end. So just want to take a look over here and see if there's any questions. Nothing yet. Oh, Ray did ask how do you get the plugin, and Wes actually answered that. Basically, the plugin is built into Photoshop, Ray, the raw plugin. You just, if you were to do a file open and choose a raw file in Photoshop, it would actually open up that raw plugin for you. So I'm going to hop onto one more image here, and then we'll go back to Scott and let him hit his next image. So here I have a greater yellow legs that I photographed. Pretty far away, you can see he was right smack in the center. That's definitely not a composition I would like to do, but he was moving, and at the time I was on the center focus point, so that's how it was composed in the camera. But you can also see the bird doesn't stand out that well right now. So moving on to the next one, here's the basic Lightroom edit. So a crop to fix that composition, straighten it out. Just like Scott mentioned earlier, I shoot crooked all the time. I almost never have a photo that I don't need to straighten or that I don't need to crop. So here's the crop. That's the composition I ended up with. And with the Lightroom adjustments, the bird is standing out a little bit more now than it was before. It's got a little bit better contrast. But what I really wanted and what I really saw that day was the warm yellow sun was really hitting the bird, but everything else around it had kind of a nice cool blue tone to it. So the final edit in Photoshop really accentuates that. So now you can see the bird is really standing out now. The background went really blue, and I kind of used a color contrast here of the warm yellow tones and the cool blue tones to really make the bird stand out. So again, there's the Lightroom edit, and here is Photoshop's final image. And if I do a complete before and after again for you, you can see pretty significant change from the straight out of the camera and the final edited version. And again, both of those photos were probably less than 5-minute edits, probably more like a 2 to 3 minute edit, so you didn't have to go crazy there. So I'll hand it back off to Scott here and see what he wants to talk about.
All right, so I'm going to do this Ren again one more time, but I'm going to do it a different way, and then I'm going to get onto some new images. But again, this was the before. When I brought it in from either Lightroom or what I do with Photoshop Raw, it's going to look like this. In general, again, I'm going to darken the area behind the bird. So in this case, I created a curves adjust layer, which is what I use almost every time to do this. And there you can see it's darker. If you have any questions with curve adjust layers, I would encourage you to play around with it if you're at the stage where you're using Photoshop more to edit and you're doing Lightroom to do your basic adjustments. But a curves adjust layer either darkens or lightens an area. In this case, I darkened behind it. I add a little pop on the front of the bird, and now you can see the eye really shows better. This is lit. And then I'm going to show you just a quick before and after. And you can see before the eye's kind of dead, and the focus, there's some brighter areas around here. And then the after, it kind of mutes these back areas and takes your attention away, and it brings your focus really on just the head. And on portraits, again, I do a lot of portraits on songbirds. I really feel like that's where you want all the attention to go, so that's what I try to accentuate there. I'll turn it back to Ray, and then I've got a couple more different birds to show, so we don't have to keep looking at this wren.
Nice. All right, so Wes asks, hang on one here. I'm just going to switch back to my screen, or at least try to.
Yeah, Wes was asking about cloning out sticks. So yeah. I know we both do it.
Yep.
It's ideal. Like in this wren, there were no sticks to clone out, so I was able to get, a pretty clean shot. If there's anything that I find, like I know Ray will talk about, like anything that intersects the head, Ray goes crazy about it.
Yeah, I can't stand it. So I am definitely, in that regard, I'm definitely not a purist as far as removing any distracting elements. I have no problem doing that. For me, my goal with wildlife photography is to present a nice to look at photo. I try my best, and I don't think I ever really do completely alter the scene, so I won't add anything to it. Or, if there were, let's say there was like a horrible stick going right through the center of the entire bird, I wouldn't remove that. That photo would just get deleted, or I probably wouldn't have taken it in the first place. But if there are sticks off to the side, or even a small stick that just goes over part of the bird, and the photo itself is worth saving, and I can remove that, I definitely would. And you'll see on the last photo I showed today where I talk about, I'll actually show you an example of something I removed that I thought made the photo better. But real quick, I'm just going to go through a couple more photos here. Basic American Robin photo. This is straight out of camera. here is the Lightroom edit. So this was all done just in Lightroom, so I actually cooled off the foreground a little bit. You can see from the original it was a little bit more of a neutral green. I actually went with an even cooler green, and then I warmed the background. And then in the final Photoshop edit, I really made those color differences stand out, and I really made the eye and the robin stand out a lot more. So again, going from complete beginning to end, it's not like a night and day change here, but it's pretty significant, and the photo definitely stands out a little bit better. And I'll go through just one more. Here is Sanderling running on the beach. Colors are pretty muted in this in the original one. The lighting was nice, but it wasn't strong, so the colors weren't really rich. And so in Lightroom, the edit I did there, sorry about that. Let's see. So here was the original out of camera. Here's the edit in Lightroom, so now the colors are popping a little bit more saturated. And then in Photoshop, I really accentuated that blue and the warm tones. And again, so I do this a lot, where I will try to introduce contrast between the subject and the background by using color differences. And often it is a difference between like a warm tone, so something that's like a yellow, orange tone, brownish, and a cool tone, so blues, cyans, those colors. They definitely contrast well, and when you have them, one on the subject and one in the background, you can definitely make your subject stand out. So I'll show you guys real quick the total before and after on that. And again, not a night and day change, just minor edits as I went along the process, but a big difference in the end. You ready to hit your next one, Scott?
Yeah, I've got two lined up here.
Okay, cool. Let me get you. All right, you're ready to go.
Okay, so this first one, I'm going to do this is a black-throated green warbler. When I looked at this, as I was kind of reviewing, I knew this was going to have potential, but it doesn't look good. Like again, a lot of people share right out of the camera, just do a quick crop and throw it out online. This is not something I would ever put my name on, but I knew it was sharp. I had a really nice pose.
It had potential.
And I thought it had potential. So what I did is I brought it in with these adjustments. So you can see it warmed it quite a bit. I haven't done any editing on this. This was just what came out with from Lightroom or Raw. And I'm just going to build the layers on this real quick. So these are the layers I added. You could see there's your clone, Wes. All right, so yep. I got rid of that one stick in the background.
Good call.
I kind of changed some
nice.
of what was going on with that stick there, but
yeah.
The big thing was right here. So this is the first layer of burning. I got rid of some of these lighter areas, and then you'll see a big difference here.
Hey, can you just hop back to that last burn, Scott?
Take off the burn?
No, yeah, just click it on and off. I also wanted to point out how you actually use that burn to accentuate the darker areas on the bird's head.
Yep.
So you actually created a little bit more contrast and enhanced the bird's markings. So those markings are there, but that burn was really smart and well done. But it actually accentuates those markings. So I just want to point that out. I noticed it.
Yep. And then I did another dodge layer, and you'll see the eye pop right here. So you'll see that eye, and you can even see these white feathers here. It looks like I dodged those as well. When you put that all together and you add a lot of little layers, it's one action that I run that creates all those layers, and then I just pick which ones I want to use. But watch the before and after. So that's what it came in as. You could see the eyes kind of dead, and the focus isn't necessarily on the head. There's a bright stick over here and a bright area underneath. And then afterwards, that's all cleaned up, and we have the focus just right on the head. This is actually one of my favorite black-throated green portraits.
That's a nice one.
And again, that's what it came out of the camera, not something I would share. And then that was something I would put my name on.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to do one more real quick, Ray.
Yeah, go for it.
This is one that I actually liked coming right out of the camera. I thought it had a lot of potential. So these are just very subtle changes to this one. This is what right out of the camera, it looked like this. From Lightroom,
nice.
It looked more like this. And not a whole lot was done to this one, but I'm going to show you the layers as I brought them on. There's a burn layer just at the bottom. I thought the bottom was a little brighter than I wanted.
It also richens the color.
I actually burned it in another layer just to get rid of some of that highlight. Here's the first dodge layer.
Nice.
Looks like it did a couple dodge layers here. I added a little bit more. I added one more. And then I actually, looks like I dialed down the saturation because that bottom was really glowing.
Yeah.
I'll show you the before. And again, subtle difference, but I think it makes a difference in where I want the focus on this bird to be is always up top. The nice thing about the edit, for example, on this one, and a lot of what Ray does is these dodge and burn edits, if you ever wanted to enter something in a contest, they always allow, almost everyone I've ever seen allows for dodging and burning. They don't always allow for cloning
Correct.
and over sharpening and stuff like that.
So Jerry actually just pointed that out in the comments. That's he kind of does the same thing. He'll remove sticks and stuff like that. But if you ever plan on adding your photos to most contests, definitely read the rules. Just like Scott mentioned and Jerry mentioned, most of them don't allow for the addition or removal of objects. And I would say with your dodging and burning to try and keep it to a minimum. You certainly can, modify the photo just to kind of lighten areas, darken areas. But as you'll see in my next example, actually, I went extreme with some dodging and burning, and I think it might be kind of pushing it a little far for a contest. So I'll hop over to anything you wanted to show more on that one, Scott? Sorry.
Now, I'll try to find somebody asked a picture question about high pass filters. So I was going to try to show it on this one. It's not a good example, so I'll try to find another one. But
I do not. But
for
Scott
Garrett,
does.
who asked the question, that's what I use for sharpening. So, but I only do it selectively, and I only normally do it around the eye and the bill. So I'll try to find an example if I can.
I'm one of the oddball editors. I have a default Lightroom Sharpen setting that I use when I import it. It's really minimal and doesn't really do much, and that's the only sharpening I ever do on any of my images. I don't ever do any other selective sharpening in Photoshop or anything like that. It's just a real basic sharpen, and then there's also a basic sharpen that gets applied when the photo is exported at the proper size. So, all right, I'll switch over to my screen here and show you a nicely overexposed image of a black-crowned night heron. So this heron came out of nowhere. I wasn't really expecting him, and then he started stalking in the shallows really close to me. I was using, let's see here. So yeah, I was actually in full manual settings on this one, but obviously I misread this scene when I set the camera and completely overexposed it. I shouldn't say completely. I overexposed it by a good stop or so. But the beauty of RAW is the basic Lightroom edit here, and you can see the details come right back in. So I did a little bit of a crop, and I also darkened the image, brought the detail back in those highlights. So from the original out of the camera, edit in Lightroom, and you can see all those details came back. Now the next step I did here, and this is where you'll see where I got a little bit more extreme. I saw this image as the heron really kind of coming out of the dark, the shadows, and I wanted to really accentuate that. So in Photoshop, I really darkened that background. And I'll actually open this one up in Photoshop to show you guys the layers, kind of like Scott has been doing. Oh, sorry, I gotta wait for my Photoshop to open. My fault. All right, here we go. So here we are in Photoshop, and I'll turn all the layers off. I noticed Scott was doing this. For anyone that isn't aware, if you hold the Option key or Alt key and click the layer visibility eyeball, it will toggle everything on and off. So whatever layer you click will be the only one visible. The first clone layer I did here was to actually remove a couple distracting elements. I actually fixed a little bit of something odd on the build there as well. And then the next thing is the strong burn. Then I added another burn layer to kind of darken specific areas. Then I really went darker with the curves adjustment layer, dodged certain areas, so I actually made the second eyeball show up a little bit more, and the plumes off the back of the head there, and then added a contrast layer that, let's see where this affected it, right in the eyeball there. So I actually enhanced the contrast, and I'll zoom in here to show you. So there's before and after. It's subtle, but I kind of increased the detail in that eyeball there. And then the last one actually warms up the tone on the bird because I thought it was a little bit too kind of bluish and too cool. So all those things add up to a change from original straight out of the camera to a much more dramatic photo for the final image there. So hopefully you can see, and again, that was probably I spent less than 10 minutes on that, I can tell you for sure. So nothing too crazy there. I'm just going to check the questions real quick. Nothing yet, so I'm going to move on to the next image here. We'll just try and keep this going along. American oyster catcher chick on the beach, backlit with the sand. So I'm not sure if you can see in the original here. I'll zoom in a little bit, but there is sand blowing, and that was really a big part of the image for me, so I wanted to accentuate that. So the Lightroom edit, I warmed it up significantly so it looked a little bit more like it did to my eye when I shot it that day. The sun was really low in the sky, so everything was kind of glowing. and now you can really start to see the sand standing out a little bit more. And then the final Photoshop edit actually takes that sand blowing to an extreme. I actually show a lot more detail on the bird. I added a slight bit of catch light to the eye. I should say I enhanced it. It was kind of there, but not very much. And then I just kind of richen up that background there. And then I'll just do one more and then hand it back to Scott. Ring build gall, another backlit image. Again, the camera completely chose the wrong white balance on this. Because we shoot raw, I think most of us, at least myself, shoot in auto white balance all the time. I never worry about picking a white balance because I can set it after the fact. Is that how you handle it, Scott?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. So it's just one less setting you have to worry about because it's super easy to edit that after the fact. In any case, the camera chose the completely wrong white balance. So first edit in Lightroom is to straighten it, crop it, and bring the white balance a little bit more back to what I thought it should be. And then I remember the gull standing out, like kind of glowing a lot more against a darker background. And basically what happened was the sun was shining into my lens here, so I kind of got a little bit of flare on the lens, which gives it that kind of weak, contrasty, or not contrasty look. And it makes the background almost kind of a grayish tone. So when we get into Photoshop, I actually brought it back a lot more to what I see. And I will pop this one open in Photoshop just to show you what I did. There were some questions, so let me just check those real quick. Yeah, Josh, I play with that black point slider all the time. That's like almost always a default in my edits. I bring shadows up a lot and bring the blacks back down to maintain the contrast level. And then Wes asks, Flickr or Instagram? I share everywhere. I share Flickr, Instagram, 500 pixels, Facebook, and what else? I know I'm missing one. Maybe that's it now. Scott, you share in a couple places too, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think Flickr and Instagram and 500. I'm not real active on Flickr and Instagram. I use Flickr to import to Instagram a lot, so that's kind of why I use it now.
Yeah. And then Josh says gulls are so beautiful. That's awesome. Yeah, so here's the layers on this. So the first thing I want to point out is I actually made a very detailed selection of just the bird. So here's that layer mask that I did. I hand painted this, so I did this by hand. So this edit took a little bit longer. So the first layer actually brings the contrast down on the entire image and makes it more rich. The next layer actually brightens up just the bird and the reflection a little bit there. The next one actually enhances the beak, the eye, and it actually lightens up some of the splash a little bit there. So if you see this selection there, those are the part of the images that are being affected by this curves adjustment layer. And then the next one is a little bit more richness in the background, and again I'll show you that mask. So this is more of a gradient mask that I applied, but then I made sure it didn't affect the bird itself. So I wasn't darkening the bird anymore, just the background around it, and that's it. So all those changes add up to a significant change in the image. So whereas this one, the bird is almost kind of the same tone as the background, now it's lighter against the dark background and really stands out. And if we look at the total before and after on this one's kind of one of those night and day images where it's a pretty significant difference there from the original out of the camera to what it was in the end. But when I took that photo and saw it in the back of the camera, I knew I could get it there, just because I kind of have an idea of what I can do in Photoshop. So back to Scott.
All right, I'm going to do two quick ones. So got a scarlet tanager in northern Pennsylvania. It was real close. This is uncropped out of the camera. And again, good detail. So I knew I had something to work with, and real clean background. Just a couple sticks here, but I think I left those in the final edit. After I imported it, this is what I came in with.
Looks like
This
you got rid of one
has
or two
no
of the sticks.
Photoshop adjustments. I may have cloned out a stick over here. I can't tell. It looked like there was a stick there before.
I think so, yeah.
But left this one in. I didn't think it hurt anything.
No.
So nice portrait. Adding in the layers. This actually, for Garrett, I'll see if I can zoom in. This is a high pass filter. So if you guys can see that was a little bit of sharpening. But it also sharpens the whole image. So if I do that, I typically put a noise reduction everywhere else. So I don't want to get too complicated, but I do a little noise reduction and a little sharpening if needed. But what I do on every image is darken that area behind the bird, lighten that area in front of the bird. On this one, I added some saturation in front too. And I think this one pops the eye a little bit more. So when you go back, that's where we started with. I think this is one I would have posted out of the camera. I felt it was strong enough, but I think that to me
Yep.
is just a little more dramatic. And for portraits, to me, you want to add some pop to the eyes and make
Always,
sure
yeah.
that head stands out. So that was one. And then I actually wanted to show, this is my favorite golden kinglet,
Nice.
golden crown kinglet ever. This is what it looked like out of the camera. It was very close. This was probably shot at about 7 feet. It brought that in from Lightroom or Photoshop Raw into this. Again, that's actually my final edit. Let me
Yeah, I
show you
was
what it looked
gonna
like
say.
before. So yeah, that one, I was going to say this one didn't need a whole lot of work, and it doesn't really need a whole lot of work. This is another one that I would have just cropped and done some color adjustment in Lightroom and been fine with posting, but
And I want to
I
point out, I
did
think
do
a
a
lot
little
of
bit of
people,
burn down on the bottom.
yeah, I think a lot of people
Again,
would leave
very
it
typical
exactly where
edit.
it's at.
Yep, a little edit on the curve adjustment to lighten the head, a little pop on the eye, and then I added some saturation. And I hope you could see that, but to me, this was right at dawn, like very, very early, so everything was still glowing, and I wanted to make sure that came through in the picture. So not a ton of edits on this one, but I felt it added a little pop around the head. And again, I'm always trying to, on portraits, I'm always trying to get the eyes and get the lighter part to show around the head.
And it also really changes where your eye goes in that image. So in the
Yep.
original, if you could turn those layers off real quick, Scott,
Yep, I'll
you can
turn.
see. So the lightest area is almost the background, especially bottom left, top left. But then when Scott does all those edits, now your eye is drawn a lot more to the head of that bird, and that's a great use of just somewhat subtle dodging and burning to kind of force the viewer's eye where you want it to go. So nice job there.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Ray. I actually picked these pictures because in most of them I felt like the lighter parts were the areas behind the bird and below the bird. And so I just wanted to show that you can alter where your eye goes just by, and dodging and burning, once you learn how to do it, it's a very, very quick process.
It's
A couple
simple.
minutes and you're done.
Yep. Yeah, and Denise just commented that the before and afters really helped so much. She definitely wants to get more of a handle, an understanding on post processing, and that was our pretty much our goal with this. Is we wanted to show how most of these edits aren't anything too crazy, so we wanted to show how these somewhat basic, 5 to 10 minute edits can really make a good image go to a great image. And I think a lot of people would do just their basic global edits and kind of leave it at that point, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. Please don't feel like there is, but we just wanted to show you how you can kind of take your image to the next level with some basic editing.
Yeah, and Haley says like she wouldn't even know how to attempt that, but it's okay, sister.
Yeah.
There are easy edits out there, and I would start with like the dodging and the burning are easy ones to just figure out where to start. When you start getting into detailed selections and stuff, it can be a little bit tougher. But there are easy edits that make a difference.
This is true. Yep. Did you have another one lined up, Scott? If not, I do.
What's that?
Did you have another one you were ready to go to? If not, I do.
I can go to my, I have one more left. I can go to it if you want.
I'm on my last one too, so why don't you hit yours? I'll hit mine, then we'll do our edit
Okay.
off.
Okay. So this is a lot of people know in Ocean City there's a pretty popular little rookery. So
Oh, yeah.
Ray and I were poking around, and the juveniles were just hatching. So we went down. This one was real cooperative. What I liked about this, it's not a great image. Again, this is not something I would post out of the camera, but we tried to get these foreground elements. There was a lot of stuff in front of the bird, so we were actually trying to frame them in that. So you could see there's this foreground V, and he happened to kind of position himself here. I moved around. I was able to get him right in the middle, and I wanted him to look head on so I could get both the eyes. So this was out of the camera, but to me, it's a very cool image. There's not a lot of warmth here. So when I brought it over, I cropped it differently to get that other bird out. And already it made a big difference, just warming the image overall, changing the temperature of the picture. Again, that's just a slider adjustment. I think most people know how to do that in Lightroom. It's pretty quick and easy. When I add the layers on, I wanted to get rid of all these distractions without cloning them out, so I just burned the crap out of them. So we got them real dark.
Nice.
In that process, I also wanted it to make it look like light was kind of hitting the head. That eye and that stare was pretty fierce, so I put one dodge burn layer there's a saturation layer that increased the saturation in there.
Nice.
Looking at it now, maybe I overdid it,
No, I
but
think it's good.
anyway,
Yeah.
okay. And then look at the before and after. So when you're doing it layer by layer, you don't always see
Correct.
the difference, but there's the before. Again, that's not an image that's horrible, but to me, that's,
Yeah.
a much different image and very dramatic. So on some of these portraits, I'll go for dramatic. So when you look at where we started, we started with that. A lot of people, not
Yeah.
really great. You end with that. At least it's something that's dramatic and a little bit different.
And so once you learn these tools and you have them in your toolbox and you kind of know the different things that you can do with an image, it starts to become so there's a progression that happens. So it turns into when you start looking at an image on a computer, you think, all right, I can take this image from here to there, and then even further down the road, it becomes if I shoot this way, I know I can edit it this way and present it this way. So there are times where I'll shoot an image and specifically under or overexpose it or crop it a certain way or just do something when I'm shooting with already having the decision in my head that I'm going to edit that photo a certain way because I have these tools that I know how to use a certain way. So I think that really kind of starts to change how you approach wildlife photography once you get more proficient at post-processing. And before I go into my image, there's a couple of questions. Jamin says he hasn't tried any of that stuff, but he wants to get better at that. That's good. He asks, have we ever used Topaz Labs products? Scott, do you ever use any of those filters from
No.
Topaz? No, same here. Um, I am, again, I think one of the oddballs that I never use any plugins of any sort. I learned Photoshop back on version 4, and I don't mean CS4, I mean version 4 that came out in 1999. And so I kind of learned Photoshop before it had any of these extra plugins and filters and became very proficient at it back then. So I still kind of use those same techniques and just never got into the plugins and add-ons. But I do know some people that swear by them and love them.
Yeah, I know Mark uses a noise reduction that I've seen his before and afters are pretty good.
Yeah.
If you guys want to, in comments, if anybody, I know we've got some people that use Photoshop quite a bit and they're probably pretty good at it. So if
Yeah.
you want to just put what you use and why you use it in the comments, that's great.
Yeah, that'd
And
be
then
great.
somebody did also ask about the crop ratio. I think Ray and I both crop to whatever we think works best. I'm going to try to I'll pull up like this black-throated green. I probably 50% of the time I crop to 5:7. I just think those dimensions work for me. But if it suits it better to more of a pano, I'll go a little bit wider. If I go to a portrait, so for example, on this heron that we just looked at, my guess is that that's 4 by
Closer to 8 by 10,
5.
yeah. Yeah,
So
correct,
most of
yeah.
my portraits are 4 by 5, and most of my landscapes are 5:7.
So I actually don't crop that way. Probably 90%, maybe even 95% of my photos, I keep original camera proportions. And I have a different reason for that. I do a lot of stock photography sales, and I do try to sell all of my photos on an online print gallery. Nobody actually buys them, but I try to sell them. And in any case, to just keep things consistent across the board, I do stick with the same proportion almost all the time, other than the occasional panorama. But I think Scott's method of cropping is certainly probably better for photos because you can just have a little bit more freedom there. So let's see, there was one last question. Rosemary asked, how did you become so proficient in Photoshop? Well, I'll answer and then I'll let Scott answer. I actually, like I said, I learned in version 4. I got a book called the Photoshop Bible. It was like a 1,000-page book on Photoshop. I read it cover to cover, and somehow at that time I was able to just retain it all. Other than that, the jobs I've had, I basically use Photoshop 40 hours a week for probably 15 years straight. So I just became very proficient at it.
Yeah, I will tell you the one great thing about the internet is YouTube gives you every technique. So if you just see something or you pick somebody's brain or you hear something in conversation, you're standing around some other photographers and you hear something and you just make a mental note and then you go home and you pull up YouTube and there's a video for it.
Yep.
So every technique that I learned, I think I learned from YouTube and just watched a lot of videos. There are people that do every week, they'll put out something. And there's one by Flern. I don't know if anybody follows that. That was a guy that I thought was really helpful, and I liked his style. So I was just attracted to him. There's nobody that's really better or worse if you're going to try to follow people, but you'll find topics out there. And then I was lucky enough that I almost walked into Ray the first time we met at Barnegat, and I almost stepped on him because he was hidden in between some rocks, and that was like 3 years ago. So I'd already
Yeah.
dabbled in Photoshop and started to learn, and I've certainly picked his brain, and we do a lot of similar things now because I've learned from him. So
Yeah,
he's
I
been
was
a
just
great
gonna
teacher.
say, make friends, make good friends. We've talked about this in the past, just for finding photography locations and just making a good connection with other people in this hobby. And I think part of that even goes into this post processing thing. Scott has shown me some methods. Most recently, one to remove banding that I think is really cool that I never would have learned on my own. So, it's definitely like a give and take. So. Um, just a couple more questions came through. Pete asked, what do we think about square crops? I think when they fit the image, I think they're fine. I know some people kind of have like a bit of a problem with them, or they really don't like them. I don't have any issue with them. I don't tend to do them myself, or often or at all. But I think when it works, it works. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Scott.
No, I was actually reading the question, so I was trying to do the math on this. Somebody asked about cropping to 5 by 7, so
Oh yeah, I see that. Um, yeah, so I think square crops are fine. Did you have any other questions you needed to answer? If not, I'll move on to the next image.
no, just in terms of like the cropping to 5 by 7, if I print larger, if I print anything, so I format or crop to what my eye wants to compose it to. If I print something, which I don't print a whole lot, but if I did, or if somebody called and said, "Hey, I'd like this," I actually go through and re-edit the picture, and I'll crop it to whatever dimensions I think I'm going to go. So if I can take what I did already and just recrop and trim a little off the sides, that's fine. But 5 by 7 is kind of in between, and so it gives you a little bit of flexibility. If you want to
It's close to
pull a
both,
little off
yeah.
the ends, you're still normally fine. If you want to go the other way, you can normally go the other way, and you're still it's a little bit of an in between crop, so
I would
it
agree.
works. And
Yeah,
if not, I just re-edit the whole thing.
there you go. All right. Last image I have here. This is another day Scott and I were shooting together. One of the most amazing experiences we had with this clapper rail. Um, these are generally really secretive birds, and we were both just amazed when this sucker came walking right out into the open for us in like some of the best morning light ever. So in any case, this is an image I wanted to edit. So, straight out of the camera here. Again, you'll notice a very centered crop just because I was using the center focus point on the camera. And a dowitcher in the background that I don't really like. He's out of focus. He adds nothing to the image. So first steps I'm going to do here in Lightroom is to straighten it. I warmed it up a significant amount and I cropped it. So I went with my normal kind of offset crop, gave it a little bit of space in front of the bird here. And then from here, I'll show you right into the final edit, and I changed it a lot. So the dowitcher came out. There was a big clump of stuff here. There was a big clump of stuff in between his legs that came out. And then I had actually, this is where it helped to have a group of friends. So I shared this image. Let me pop this open in Photoshop. I shared this image with a group of friends that I talked to. Scott is one of them, and asked the guys what they thought of this image with these reeds on the left included in it. So I have these nice two standalone reeds here and then this one clump on the left. So I had originally edited it like this, and they all kind of agreed and pointed out that they were a bit distracting on the left. So I took them out. And this is kind of where I have no problem doing that because I think it makes for a better image. And I'll show you the edits, the layers on this from beginning to end. So first layer is to remove just a couple of oddball things here and that bird and the clump underneath of it. And then, like I said, I removed the entire clump on the left. This was all done with just clone stamp. Next curved layer introduces some contrast and a little bit darker background. Then I burned the foreground, which was a little bit too light, and a little bit up at the top there. There was a light spot up there. Next thing adds a little bit of blue into the background there. Again, talking about that color contrast that I like to introduce. The next layer actually warms up the bird a little bit. So those two layers, if I turn them on and off, you can start to notice they add some contrast to the image, make the bird stand out a little bit more. Then we do a dodge layer here. This is probably just for the eye. Yep. So if I zoom in, oops, that's too far. And I'll turn that. There's before, after. I just kind of lightened up all the color in the eye there. And then a little bit of contrast on the bird again. And the last layer up here is just a selection that I had to cut out the bird there. So all those layers together make for a pretty significant before and after, and compared to the original capture, again, this is a big change there. So that was all I had. Any other images you wanted to show, Scott?
No, the only image I have up is the same clapper rail. It's funny because I almost chose a clapper rail for this
Nice.
today, but I realized I was lucky that I got this one so clean. I put it up on the screen. I didn't have to edit it.
Hang on,
Almost
let me
anything.
switch to your screen.
So there
Sorry
wasn't
about
really a
that.
before and after. I
Yeah.
just lightened the eyeball, I think a hair, and that was it. So yeah, that was a great day.
Nice. All right, cool. You ready to do this edit?
Yeah,
All right.
I got to remember where the thing is.
Okay. You let me know when you're ready. So here's what we're gonna do, guys. I'm gonna set a timer for myself here for the both of us for 2 minutes, and we're both going to just see if we can, or how much we can do with the edit here in 2 minutes. So I'm gonna be editing in Lightroom. Scott is gonna be editing in Camera Raw plugin in Photoshop.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually nervous right now.
Yeah. Nice. So you have your image open?
Yeah,
Right?
I just opened it up.
Okay, cool. All right.
This
so,
is compliments. We wanted one that we
Oh, yeah,
hadn't seen
that's right.
before, so we basically just glanced at it. I'm opening it really for the first time.
Yeah, same here.
This is compliments of Tyler Reber,
Yes.
who's one of our good friends.
Yes, yeah, great photographer as well. Definitely look him up and follow him if you already don't. And you ready to go, Scott?
Yeah, we're not really going to talk much. We're just going to go, and if you follow along at the end, you can ask questions about what we did.
Yeah, please do.
But I think we set a 2 or 3 minute timer. You got a 3-minute timer?
Let's go 3 minutes. Yeah, we'll do 3 minutes.
All right.
All right, and go for it.
All right, ready?
Yep.
Go. Ray's computer's faster.
It probably is.
Oh, I messed up already.
2 minutes left, Scott.
All right.
I mean, I'm on a roll over here. I don't know what you're doing, but
Yeah, my computer's literally freezing up because I think I have like 48 windows open right now.
yeah, I do. But my computer's alright with that. So
Yeah.
actually, it's running a little bit slower than normal. Minute 30 left, Scott. Just a heads up.
All right. I'm not going to have time to pull this blue channel down. That's going to bother me.
And if anyone's asking questions now, we'll get to them at the end. We're right in the middle of an edit off here, so I'm trying for something big here. See if I can squeeze it in the amount of time here. Not sure if I'll make it happen or not.
I don't think I'm going to clone this duck out in time.
Oh, you're going for duck removal, are you?
I was trying to get it, but I don't think I'm going to have time to do it.
Oh, my computer's crawling now too. I think we might have been able to get rid of the duck. It's like a 4-minute edit.
Oh no.
It's got to be getting close.
Oh, I did such a bad job on this clone.
Don't worry, so
I
did
think I
I.
tried to do too much with it. I told you I'm literally sweating right now.
Too funny. Timer. All right, we'll stop where we're at, and then
All
we'll just kind
right.
of talk about where we're gonna head anyway. All right, so
Oh, I
let's
got some artifacts in here. Hold on.
let's
I can't. I
let's full
can't.
screen.
All right, there we go.
Oh, so I went for a duck removal, and so did you, but we went for a different duck removal.
No, I left that one in.
Yeah, no, you left the one behind the duck in. I took that one out.
There's no way you had time to take that duck out.
Yeah, it's gone right now. Can't you see? All right, so I would have actually. So I'll talk about mine first. So I actually did a couple things. I got a clone layer here that got rid of the duck behind the main subject there. I didn't get to completely finish it, but I was pretty close. Give me one more minute, I would have had it completely gone and a little bit better. The next retouch layer actually got rid of this odd stick coming in on the right. Um, uh, Given no time restraints, I would have also removed the duck in the background that Scott was going for. I would have isolated this to make it just a single pintail. Um, then I did a burn in the bottom and the top. I also did, there's another one a little bit more extreme. Then I did a dodge on the bird's face, and then a dodge on that eye to really make the eye stand out. I would have completed this with a little bit of enhancement on the purple tone that's showing on the drake there, and then I probably would have increased some contrast across the body to really make that stand out. And I may or may not have removed this branch I'm pointing to on the back left there. So Scott, I'll give you full screen now. You can tell them what you did and what you would have done with more time.
Yep. So, hold on. So this was what I started with. Oh my God, I think my computer just locked up. But anyway, I'll talk through
Uh,
it. Um, yeah, I'm telling you, I had so much open
oh,
at
there you
some
go.
point.
Yeah, you're getting things turning on and off now.
All right. So anyway, I just took and like Ray, I burned the top and bottom a little bit.
Yep.
The only thing I dodged was the eyeball.
Okay.
So I dodged just a hair there. I probably would have played around with that more if we had more time. There's the original. I was able to really poorly clone out the one duck. I would
Yeah,
have
that's
gotten
a
rid of these
rough job.
branches. If you zoom in on my clone job, it's pretty wretched.
My cutout isn't too good
But I did
either.
get rid of that one clump over on the right as well. What else did I do? I didn't do anything with color or saturation or anything like
Oh, I warmed it
that.
up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did that when I brought it in.
On the raw file,
I
I
think
did
I
correct. Yeah.
pulled up the shadows and decreased the highlights and moved the whites up. I probably would have gotten rid of some blue tones on the bill. I don't know if I would have done that or
They
not. And
generally
I wish
have
we
a
had a
blue
way to
bill though,
show
so
Tyler's.
he said he was going to drop his in the
Tyler, if
comments.
you put it into our group, we might be able to do something with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was fun.
That was fun. Yeah, I think everyone enjoyed that as well. Maybe we'll give ourselves an extra minute next time because yeah, 3 minutes didn't sound like much. I thought we could do a little bit more, but maybe we had a little bit of an ambitious image there. So questions in the comments. You guys have any questions you guys want to throw at us? I'm not sure if I'm seeing up-to-date comments, Scott. Do you see any questions in there?
It was funny. Tyler Reber puts a link for his. Tyler will probably win the edit off because he had much more time, or else we would have slayed
Yeah,
him.
exactly.
And if you guys have any suggestions, I think Ray and I figured we would do this every couple weeks, and I know that some of the other guys will probably jump in at some point. Ray will have some other people do this.
Yeah.
He does a
Yeah,
great job
certainly.
with it. I like having fun with them, so
Yeah,
I
this is
never
fun.
mind sitting in on his stuff. But if you have any topics for Ray, put them in comments or send him an email if there's anything you'd like to see or anything you'd like us to do again.
Yeah, please certainly do. Feel free to message me with any of that stuff. Um, if you have any questions that you'd think of after the fact, drop them in the comments. We do try to revisit that. And let's see. I think there's some more comments coming in right now. Susan says she loves the editing duel. That's great. Mark can hear your computer. Nice. Tracy, yes, the full video will be posted, and it'll actually be higher quality. So I actually record the video in a higher quality to my computer, and then I will post that later. Let's
Mark can hear
see.
my computer chugging. Thank you, brother.
Yes, exactly. Uh,
Love the support.
Denise says when she clones, she gets a muddy look. How do you avoid that? Practice, 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 practice. Cloning is actually, so to understand it isn't too difficult, but to become efficient and skilled at it definitely takes a lot of work. So I would just say, keep cloning, do it as much as you possibly can. I use the clone tool for almost all of my removal these days, but like I said, I've been using that clone tool for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for probably just honestly over 17 years now straight, just using those tools every single day. So the amount of hours I've racked up using that are just astronomical. But it's simply like most things: practice, practice, practice. Uh, cool. Haley says covered a lot. She enjoyed it. Um, Perfect. Cool. This looks like a really good one. Oh wait, one quick question. Can you guys go over what you would want to see for these images as a final product? I guess he's talking about the edits we just did. I think we kind of did talk about that a little bit. We would have just done a little bit more dodging and burning, a little bit more color enhancement, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of all only place I would have gone with that. So, uh, anything else you want to add, Scott, before we wrap it
I
up?
think that's it.
All right, cool. Thank you everyone for joining in. We really appreciate it. And I'll have this video to share in the future in a little bit higher quality. And we'll let you know the next time we're going to do this. Thanks a lot.
All right. Have a good night.
And